Why does intelligence lead to loneliness? Have you ever felt like you were thinking too much in a world that doesn't think enough? If so, you're not alone. In fact, the greatest minds in history, us from Socrates to Nietzsche, often walked alone. But why? Why does higher intelligence, deeper thinking, and clearer perception seem to come with an invisible cost? Loneliness? This is not just poetry, it's reality. And today, we'll explore what the Stoics, philosophers, and even modern psychologists have uncovered about this paradox. Because once you understand why intelligence isolates, you'll finally learn how to turn that isolation into a source of inner power, freedom, and peace. Let's begin where most never dare to look: the mind of a thinker. Most people talk to escape silence, but the intelligent talk to express ideas. There's a difference, and that difference is often misunderstood. The average person seeks comfort in crowds, in noise, in distraction. But the intelligent mind often finds all of that exhausting. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "Only the educated are free." But freedom comes with a price. Because the more aware you become, the more you start seeing what others don't. You notice the small details, the fake smiles, the contradictions, the illusions. You see how people repeat the same mistakes, follow the same empty trends, and run from the same inner emptiness. And suddenly, the things that once entertained you bore you. The conversations that once excited you drain you. The people you once admired disappoint you. This is not depression, it's awakening. And awakening feels lonely, at first. Marcus Aurelius, one of the wisest Stoics and a Roman emperor, once wrote, "The intelligent person avoids busying themselves with what other people think, or say, or do. They focus only on what's in their control." Think about that. How many people do you know who are truly free from caring about opinions, drama, and validation? Very few. Because true intelligence is not just knowing more facts. It's about seeing deeper. It's about being willing to walk away from the crowd when the crowd walks blindly. But here's the catch. Walking away is lonely. You'll often find yourself in rooms where no one speaks your language. Not literally, but intellectually. You'll crave depth in a world of surfaces. You'll ask why when others only care about how. And you'll be told you're too much, too intense, or too serious. But what they don't understand is that you're just awake. Socrates, the father of Western philosophy, once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But here's the part most forget. The examined life is often not easy to live. Because when you examine life, really examine it, you start to see the cracks. You see how temporary things are, how fragile people's confidence is, how artificial society has become. You realize how much of what we call normal is actually madness disguised by routine. And that realization doesn't make you popular. It makes you different. But here's where it gets powerful. This very difference is your greatest strength, if you don't run from it. The Stoics didn't seek crowds, they sought clarity. They didn't chase noise, they embraced silence. They didn't seek popularity, they pursued virtue. Seneca, the Stoic statesman, once wrote, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you. Welcome those whom you can improve." The process is a mutual one. People learn as they teach. But how many people do you know who actually want to be improved? Most seek comfort, not challenge. And intelligence, real intelligence, is a constant challenge. It questions, it doubts, it pushes back. It doesn't accept answers simply because they're popular. This kind of thinking can feel isolating until you understand the gift within it, because in that silence comes insight. In that solitude comes strength. In that stillness comes self-mastery. The Stoics taught that solitude was not to be feared, but embraced. Marcus Aurelius would often retreat into himself through journaling, not to escape the world but to understand it. He wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." Do you know what that means? It means that loneliness isn't always something to be fixed. Sometimes it's something to be used, to think, to heal, to build, to understand your own mind so deeply that no external chaos can shake your inner calm. But how do you do that in a world that never stops talking? You go inward. You stop running from your thoughts and you start listening to them. You stop chasing crowds and you start cultivating character. Because the truth is, intelligence doesn't isolate you. It reveals the separation that was already there. You just didn't see it before. Now you do. And now you have a choice. Will you use that vision to grow bitter or to grow better? The Stoics would say, use it. Use your mind as a sword, not a shield. Cut through illusion, sharpen your clarity, turn your solitude into sacred time. Because the intelligent are not doomed to be lonely forever. They're simply being prepared for something deeper. And that something begins when you stop fearing your own depth. So if you've ever felt alone because you think differently, see differently, or feel more deeply than those around you, don't shrink yourself to fit the world. Elevate yourself to reshape it. You're not broken, you're rare. And rare things are not always understood, but they are always valuable. You see, the greatest thinkers in history, Leonardo da Vinci, Nikola Tesla, Isaac Newton, were often alone. Not because they disliked people, but because they saw the world differently. They lived in a mental world that most people couldn't enter. And when you live in such a world, conversations about gossip, trends, or shallow desires feel like noise to your soul. You don't want to talk about people. You want to talk about ideas, purpose, and existence. You want to ask, why are we here? What is truth? How can I live well? And very few people want to sit in the discomfort of those questions. That's why intelligence often feels like isolation. It's not that there's no one around you, it's that there's no one around who truly understands you. But this isn't a punishment, it's preparation. Because solitude doesn't just reveal who others are, it reveals who you are. When you're no longer distracted by the noise, the opinions, and the pressure to fit in, you finally hear your own voice. And in that voice, you discover power. Not the kind that needs attention, but the kind that creates transformation. Let's go back to the Stoics. They believed that peace wasn't found in the external world in a while, but in internal mastery. They taught that a wise man could be calm in chaos, rich in poverty, and powerful in silence. Seneca said, "A wise man is content with himself. If you are wise, you will be sufficient unto yourself." That's the foundation of emotional strength, and it's a message more relevant today than ever before. Because never in history have we been more connected, and yet more lonely. Social media gives us access to thousands of people, but how many of them truly know us? You can have 100 messages and still feel unseen. You can be surrounded by followers and still feel misunderstood. That's because connection without depth is emptiness in disguise. But here's the truth. Real connection starts with real understanding, and that begins within. When you accept your intelligence as a gift, not a curse, you stop trying to dim your light to fit into rooms not meant for you. You stop faking smiles just to avoid awkward silence. You stop chasing approval and start chasing alignment. And that shift changes everything. Instead of loneliness being a void, it becomes a forge. A sacred space where your mind sharpens, your vision clears, and your identity solidifies. You stop saying, "Why don't they get me?" and start asking, "What am I here to give?" Because maybe your mind isn't meant to blend in. Maybe it's meant to break patterns, to ask hard questions, to stand where others fall silent. That's what intelligence is. Not memorizing facts, but seeing through illusions. And that kind of sight is rare. It will set you apart, but it will also set you free. Just like the Stoics, you begin to understand that your mind is your true domain. No one can imprison it. No one can disturb it unless you let them. Marcus Aurelius, facing the pressure of ruling an empire, still wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's not just philosophy, that's freedom. Because when you realize that most people are chasing pleasure to avoid pain, while you're seeking truth even when it hurts, You understand why they don't walk with you. But you also understand something greater, that you were never meant to follow the crowd. You were meant to lead, even if that means walking alone. And eventually, when you fully embrace that path, something surprising happens. You start attracting people who speak your language. Not in words, but in depth. People who think deeply, feel honestly, and live intentionally. And suddenly, your loneliness turns into leadership. Your silence turns into strength. Your inner world becomes your foundation, unshakable by noise, untouched by trends. That's the path of the Stoic. That's the path of the intelligent. It's not the easy path, but it's the one that builds a life of meaning, not just comfort. So if you felt like you don't belong, maybe that's because you're here to build something no one's seen before. And that begins by embracing your mind, fully. You see, the mind of a deep thinker is like a telescope. While others gaze at what's in front of them, you're staring into galaxies they don't even know exist. But there's a cost to that clarity. The more you understand the world, the more you realize how blind most of it is. You watch people chase what doesn't matter, status, validation, temporary highs, while you crave what can't be bought, purpose, truth, and peace. And when you try to explain that to others, they look at you like you're strange, because they're still dancing in the fog, and you've already seen what's behind the curtain. And that changes you. You start to withdraw. Not out of arrogance, but preservation, because every shallow conversation feels like an insult to your intelligence. Every meaningless distraction feels like a betrayal to your vision. You don't want to talk about who wore what or what celebrity said this. You want to talk about how to master the mind, how to conquer suffering, how to live, truly live, not just exist. You want conversations that spark revolutions inside you, not ones that waste your breath. And yet, in that withdrawal, comes the echo of loneliness. It whispers, maybe you're too different. Maybe you'll always be alone. But here's what the Stoics would tell you. That voice is not your enemy. It's your teacher. It's telling you that you've outgrown the noise. It's reminding you that not all silence is empty. Some silence is sacred. Seneca said, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you. Welcome those whom you yourself can improve." He wasn't talking about networking. He was talking about alignment. Finding people who sharpen your soul, not just fill your time. But until then, solitude is the classroom. And what you learn there becomes your power. Because when you sit with your own mind long enough, something beautiful happens. You stop needing noise to feel alive. You stop needing attention to feel worthy. You stop needing people to validate your ideas. And in that stillness, you start building your real life. Not the one society scripted for you. A life built on values, not trends. On discipline, not desire. On truth, not popularity. And that life isn't for everyone, but it's for you. Because you weren't born to follow paths. You were born to carve them. And here's the twist. The more you embrace that journey, the more you'll start noticing something unexpected. You'll begin attracting people not because you try, but because you've become. You've become the type of person who makes others think deeper. The type of person who inspires growth without even speaking. That's the paradox of intelligence. It may isolate you at first, but eventually it magnetizes the right minds. And those are the people who matter. The ones who aren't afraid to sit in silence with you. To explore the depths instead of float on the surface. To build something real, even if the world calls it strange. Because intelligence, true intelligence, isn't about knowing everything. It's about knowing yourself. Knowing what drains you, what drives you, and what you're willing to stand alone for. That kind of knowing creates power that doesn't shout. It resonates. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." So the question is, what colors are you painting with? Are your thoughts darkened by doubt, comparison, and fear? Or are they lit by vision, purpose, and peace? You get to choose, because your mind is your domain, and no one else gets to design it for you. And the moment you realize that, the loneliness begins to transform. It stops being a prison and starts being a monastery, a place of clarity, a place of refinement, a a place where the noise of the world finally fades, and you hear your own truth echo, loud, unapologetic, free. The real tragedy isn't being alone. The real tragedy is surrounding yourself with people who make you feel lonelier than solitude ever could. Because when you suppress your intelligence to fit in, you shrink. When you dim your insight to avoid judgment, you betray yourself. And when you ignore your inner voice just to echo the crowd, you get lost in a life that was never yours. So maybe loneliness is not a curse. Maybe it's a compass, pointing you back to yourself, to who you were before the world told you what to be. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." He wasn't telling you to act dumb. He was telling you to stop fearing the judgment of those who don't understand your depth. Because brilliance will always be misunderstood by those addicted to the shallow. You see, intelligence isn't about knowing random facts or using big words. It's about seeing the unseen, hearing the silence between the noise, feeling the weight of things others pass by. And that sensitivity, that awareness, it isolates you. Because you're not stimulated by distraction. You're stirred by truth. You're not drawn to comfort. You're magnetized by growth. You question systems. You challenge beliefs. You reflect when others react. And in a world running on autopilot, your self-awareness is revolutionary. But even revolutions start alone. So what do? You stop begging for belonging. You stop apologizing for your complexity. You stop chasing shallow connections that only leave you emptier. And instead, you master your solitude. You fill your own cup with wisdom, with habits, with purpose. You build a life so aligned with your values that anyone who enters it either elevates or exits. Because here's the secret. The moment you embrace your difference, you stop being lonely. You start being selective. You start protecting your peace like it's sacred. You start filtering out anything that dulls your flame. You start choosing presence over popularity. And then, without effort, you begin to find your people. Not many, but enough. The quiet warriors, the truth seekers. The ones who don't just hear your words, they feel your soul. And when that happens, when deep intelligence finds deep resonance, loneliness disappears. In its place is something stronger, something stoic. A connection that doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. A bond that grows not in the spotlight, but in the silence. Because that's where intelligence thrives. That's where purpose is planted. That's where transformation begins. Seneca once wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." And perhaps the same is true of company. It's not the one who walks alone who is lonely, but the one who needs constant noise to distract from their emptiness. So if you're walking this path alone, know that you're not lost, you're ahead. And sometimes ahead looks a lot like solitude. But keep walking, keep building, keep thinking. Because you're not broken, you're becoming. And one day others will look at the life you built, the clarity you carry, the peace you radiate, and wonder how you did it. And you'll smile remembering the silence they never saw, because the most powerful transformations happen quietly. In the shadows, in the stillness, in the loneliness. And that is exactly where your brilliance was born. So, did you enjoy the video and the lessons? Leave a comment and share your thoughts on these questions. We can always learn something new from your perspective. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so we can continue bringing more content like this to improve your life.